welcome everybody. Thanks for joining. This is a monthly webinar that we do. I'm Hugh Seaton. I'm CEO of The Link. We're an AI software and consulting company, obviously focused on construction. Some of you may know us from things like this and webinars and so on. Today, I wanted to talk about, we talk about AI in construction every month, but what I'm noticing is that the way I hear people talking about AI, whether they're assessing something, talking about a product, talking about an industry, whatever it is, I think there's a lot of scope for us to think differently about how we work with AI and get a little bit more nuanced in how we think about it. So I'm going to walk through some thinking here. As ever, if you'd like to stop me and ask a question, or if you've got thoughts on it, go for it. Feel free to pop something into the chat, and I'll get to it, when there's a natural break. But you're not going to throw me off track if you ask a question, so feel comfortable doing that. Right, so let's get into it. So, I've spent a bunch of years in different types of technology, including a bunch of media. And one of the things that we see is it's really common, in fact, it pretty much always happens, that we use old tech like we use new tech. And we're seeing that in AI. But in examples of that, in the beginning of radio, this before any of us were around, they basically did stage plays on radio until they figured out how to use radio properly. And TV, they did the same thing. This is a little more recently, but still the 50s and 60s, where they basically did radio shows on TV until they figured out how to use radio. The same thing. This is, some of us may remember that the World Wide Web in the beginning was basically magazines until we figured out search, which is really the kind of the best native way to use it. And we're seeing the same thing in AI, where we're a lot of times kind of treating it as if it were search. And I think that's right. Like I say, right now we're figuring out how to use it. And that's okay. It's a little early for us to get too conclusive about how to use AI or even what it is. But I do think we're at a point now where, after a couple of years of certainly of generative AI, and really, about 10 years of this kind of wave of AI that started with deep learning, just about 10 years ago. So, how do we even think about it? I hear people talk about it as if it's better search, which is not wrong. It's just, I don't think there's more than that. I've heard another one that I like. Is it an artificial intern? Again, not a bad analogy, but is it everything? Unfortunately, you also hear people judging it as if its answers were expected to be perfect. And that's just not reasonable. So, thinking of it almost as a magical oracle. So I wanted to get into some discussion about how we might view AI, and the starting point of all of that. You may have heard this term general purpose technology, but if not, now you have. And the reason that matters is because we're not talking about products here the way we're talking about even something as general as email. And even within email, I mean, it's all pretty standard now, but there was a while when there was a lot going on in terms of what email provider you use. Was it web-based? Was it this or was it that? Now email is kind of email. But the point is, general purpose technologies, we don't think about that much because they're usually baked into something else. Some examples you'll often hear people talk about, though, are things like, and I know this sounds crazy that we're at this level, but fire or steam or electricity, railroads, or internal combustion, even transistors, and artificial intelligence. And when you hear people like Sam Altman talk at longer timescales, they'll say this. And certainly the gentleman, Sundar Pichai from Google, has said it's like the new electricity. And the reason they say that isn't just because their stock price is based on how valuable AI is. That's not nothing, but some of it is also they know that AI is going to wind up being in products, and products are most of what you're normally using. And that actually matters a lot because, I couldn't help but use this meme. But the point is, you don't generally use a general purpose technology directly. You use the product that it's a part of. And that matters here because, again, I'm hearing things like AI can do this and AI can't do that, or AI is too early, or it's going to take our jobs, or it's this or it's that. And the reality is AI is not going to do any of those things any more than robots, automation, or electricity has done so. What is going to happen is certain products are going to do certain things. And that really matters, as I'm going to get to more, because if you don't put things in the right buckets, you don't know how to handle them. You don't know what to expect. You don't know how to use them. You don't know what to learn. You don't know what to ignore. All of that. Categories help us to navigate the world. And I think what we're doing right now with AI is what people will sometimes call a category error, where we're putting it in the wrong category, but in this case, it's the wrong kind of level of category. Let me tell you a little more about what I mean by that. So as I kind of mentioned before, when you think about a general purpose technology, it's different from what else you're used to. And we're going to get into more practical stuff in a minute, but I wanted to lay this groundwork. So most of the things we deal with, it is what it is. It's a product. It's an iPhone. It's a whatever. General purpose technologies, they show up in more than one way, and you're seeing that already with AI. I've said this in the past a few times when I talk about the difference between deep learning and generative AI, but now we're getting to the place where there's more to it even than that. But once you started to divide the world into categories, you can think a lot more clearly, and you're just getting more sophisticated. And again, as I've said, why that matters is it just changes what you expect of it. So an example from some of the things that people are using now, if I'm looking for a writing partner, I want creativity. I might not need it to be rigorous. So great example, hey, can you help me to draft an email? Or, I'm writing a note to somebody, or, help me write an agenda. I care about it, giving me new options and being creative more than I care about whether it caught everything. Obviously, it's nice if it's rigorous and it's complete, but what I care about more is that it's creative. If I'm looking for a paralegal, on the other hand, or I'm looking for somebody to go review a bunch of documents, I do need rigor. I don't really want creativity. In fact, by now, most people have heard the story of a lawyer who asked ChatGPT to write his or her, I can't remember who it was, closing arguments. And it gave a wonderful closing argument that had some really great citations. And I was either opposing counsel or the judge looked it up and realized that those were very creative citations, so creative that they weren't real. And at least two cases that led to a disbarment and a fee. So my point is, if I'm looking for it and the category I put the thing in requires rigor, then that's what I want. And AI doesn't inherently have rigor. Certainly generative AI doesn't. You need to engineer around that so that you get it. So again, assessing AI on the basis of rigor or creativity is the wrong level. Is the product that's using AI giving me the creativity because they've prompted it the right way, or they've tuned it the right way, or whatever it is that someone's done. If I'm looking for something to do first drafts, excuse me, again, 80% is all right. It's okay that there's a few things I might change. The point is it got me started, which again is one of the ways I use AI the most, is to get things started and then I can go from there. I will tell you, unlike most webinars like this, AI didn't write a stitch of what you're seeing. This is just me. I do better thinking it myself than I'm having AI do it, and that's another distinction. But we'll get into that later. So if I'm looking for automatic email responses, they need to be 100% error free. I can't have something automatically sending emails out that has some creativity to it, and I realize it was too snarky, or it was the wrong tone, or it said something incorrect. So the point of all of this is I want people to start thinking and being aware of the category they're putting AI and or the product that they're buying, so that you're not going to a chatbot and expecting it to do the things that document management might, because again, it wasn't engineered for that and you're looking for the wrong thing. So, we use subcategories all the time, and I like to talk about food and things like that because we immediately get that under that. So you want to assess AI as the product that it's in, put it in the right categories. So like I say, you don't usually order beer unless it's a restaurant that only has one beer. Typically, you're going to go a level below that and say, do you have an IPA, or do you have a Pilsner, or do you have a specific brand? You don't buy a car, you buy a type of car. So nobody says, I'm going to go buy a car and that's the end of it. That may be what you tell somebody when you're leaving the house, but you're going to a place to buy a sedan, to buy an electric car, to buy a truck, whatever. And you're probably thinking about it as a brand. And any other type of software, it's the same thing. You don't say, I need software to do this thing. You're going to get a spreadsheet, or you're going to get PM software or ERP or whatever it is. So the point in all of this is we're at the stage now with AI that we're ready to start thinking of it in these terms, because you have that level of choice now. You can go to a chat GPT as it is off the web and know what you're going to get from it. Or you can go to a product we might make, or some of the others that are out there, and know that you're getting the thing you're buying it for, whether it's, review of specs, or whether it's some other things that are out there. Obviously contracts, there's a bunch going on, and some other things. The point I'm making is now you're in a place where you should be assessing it for the reason you bought it, not as AI per se. And I think that helps and hurts us, because you may have a bad experience with one company's implementation of AI, and someone else might be doing something that's wonderful because they're more thoughtful, they've engineered it more. And that's the point, right? Is At the end of the day, you're buying a product with all of what that means. Is the UI good? Is the user interface good? Have they engineered it to give you reliable responses? Or if the responses couldn't be as reliable as you want, do they give you the ability to check and make sure that everything is right? Kind of beating this idea a little bit to death here, we don't think of an engine as one category. We think of it, is it electric? Is it gasoline? Is it diesel? So getting back to this, my two categories I often use are it's deep learning and generative AI. That's kind of like Pilsner and IPA. But then you're going to go deeper than that and see what about the brand? And that's where your use cases come in. So if you take nothing away from this roughly 45, 50 minutes of me kind of walking through this, I'd like you to think about AI and ask, okay, well, what is it? What AI? What is it being used for? What's the use case? And the related question sometimes is AI necessary for this? That's often beyond the user's kind of need to question, but it's a reasonable question sometimes. So I think we did this already. There we go. So the thing, unlike some of the other products, whether it's IPAs and so on, it is a little early to settle on AI subcategories. This is still developing. And in fact, this year, you're going to see an awful lot on the agents front. And next month, I'm talking much more about that. But you're also just going to see more and more companies that are taking their expertise and applying it to AI and using AI to make their products better. So I think subcategories are going to evolve over the next year or two. But we can do something now. You're not stuck just because you don't have the Pilsners and IPAs and so on. You'd think I was having a beer. It's only 10 a.m., so it's not that. 5 o'clock somewhere, as they say. But what I do think you can do is think about it in terms of how the benefits and the uses that they provide. And the way we do this in software and the way you do this in marketing is you think about it as personas. I think that's loose enough for now, and they're easy enough to understand. And it's really more about the benefit than the persona per se. But I've got 5 of them here that I think can help you to both use the same product in different ways, because some of these products, and I'm going to get deep into ChatGPT in a minute, have built so many little features and functions in there that there's actually more than one way you might go and use it. But also, as you use different products that are out in the market, thinking of it in terms of a persona, in terms of how you're using it, is going to help you to set your expectations and help you to make better decisions about whether you're ready to use this product or whether it's ready for you to use it. So the 5 here are this idea of a power ingredient, which I'll get to in a sec. That's kind of the oldest of them. It's just an answer provider. Artificial intern, we've heard a few times, and I like that one. Software operator is actually a new one, even though it's all over the place. The idea of AI as an interface between you and the functions of software is one I really would love you to walk away from this session also thinking about, because you're going to hear a lot about that. And that's another way that agents will actually operate. So that's kind of setting us up for next month. And then there is the agent itself, what I'm calling a specialist doer here, because I didn't want to overuse the word agent. So these are 5 ways of thinking about what AI can do that I think help you to have a more sophisticated way and just a more useful way of thinking about what is this general purpose technology. So we'll talk real quick about this. The power ingredient is what's been around for about 10 years, and this is deep learning and machine learning. You typically don't deal with this directly yourself unless you're a data scientist. Usually it's wrapped up into something else. So Struction Site and OpenSpace and Siri and Alexa and Google Vision, there's a bunch of these. Spam filters. I mean, I don't know how many of you remember how bad spam filters were, 10 or so years ago, but they're amazing now, and AI has a lot to do with that. Still annoying, but much better than they were. And then when you hear about predictive analytics, typically it's machine learning, which is really a very sophisticated math. And here's where I want to go right now is to tell you what you might expect. Now, this is my take on this, so by all means, use it as a starting point. But it'll deal with the value of machine learning and deep learning is normal software can't handle how fuzzy the real world is. It can't deal with the fact that the same face, first of all, might look different based on whether I'm smiling or the lighting or so on. So it's really good at handling fuzzy real world inputs, and that's things like documents too. Like you hear the word OCR, and that can mean a couple of things, but typically they mean AI that's dealing with how bad characters can be in the real world. Usually part of another software. To do it, you need a ton of data and a data scientist. So you're typically not really dealing with it directly. the value of is that it has really good outputs. It's the last time you're going to hear rigorous outputs in this list, but it gives you narrow answers. Usually it's a yes or a no. It's categorizing something. It's a dog, it's a cat. That was that word, it was not that word. Um, so when you see this AI, just be aware that most of the AI prior to really this year that you would have seen in an actual product probably was machine learning. That's really changing very quickly right now where people are baking generative AI in. But prior to this year and really the middle of last year, most things were this. And there's a ton of value in this. Typically in our industry, no one has enough data to do this well. There are exceptions, but it's really hard to get enough data to grow a good model. Um, anyway, so the next one is what most people who've used ChatGPT are used to, and this is we're asking it for an answer, and that's mostly it. Um, Gemini does this, Claude does this. Now we've got DeepSeek. For those of you who have been paying attention this week, at the end of this session, I've got a little to say about DeepSeek. That was really the point, but I couldn't help myself. This is great at answering questions. This is great at being creative. You can tune it more than you think you can. There's a thing inside of your settings of ChatGPT. You can actually tell it who you are and how you want answers and so on. So you can tell it different styles. In the prompt, you can do that. I did a whole thing on prompting earlier. By all means, go check that out. But also, what's really cool about it is people often find it's most valuable at providing unexpected perspectives. An example is, give me an agenda. It might think of an agenda item you didn't think of, or I've got a meeting coming up. What should I worry about? Things like surprising sometimes in how it can come up with answers that imply a sophistication that actually isn't there. It's just seen so many other things. It's kind of spitting back what it's seen. The downside, of course, is the hallucinations you hear about. It might make things up. It also might miss something important. So thinking of it as an answer provider is great, but think of it as a start, not a finish. I'm going to go through three surprising ways AI can be used as an answer provider. So one of them is often, we think we're so used to giving people a question or giving people an assignment, and then hoping that getting an answer back. But interestingly, you can actually say to AI, basically this falls under the category of tell me how to use you better, which no other tool in history can you do that with unless it's got little instructions. But this is way better than instructions. Is you can tell it to ask you clarifying questions until it can accomplish what you want. So example is, I need you to write me an agenda or write me an outline. Ask me questions one at a time until you know all you need to know to get this done. Try that out. It's actually really cool. Typically, I will warn you, you don't want to give it more than this because it'll start to answer the questions. You want to keep it really high level. What's fun about this is the process of it asking you questions is going to give it a better brief than you're likely to think of on your own, especially if you're in a bit of a hurry. And you can always say, okay, this is enough. Go ahead and write it. Like if it starts getting nuts with the questions, you can tell it to stop. That to me was kind of a surprising one that you can turn it on its head and say, ask me what you need so that you can get this thing done. That's a lot of fun. Similar to that is just, again, you're asking AI how to use itself. Help me to write a prompt for whatever it is to do an agenda. Or you've got a prompt and you say, take this prompt and make it better. Again, that's really unusual for us to think like that. Like you'd never hire someone and say, hey, I want you to ask me questions until you know how to do it. I wish people did that more often, but they typically don't. Similarly, hey, I want you to go do this, but come back to me with a better example or better instructions. Again, it'd be cool if we ever did this, but that's not how the real world works. And that's also not always a wonderful way to kind of, run a department. But you can do this and you can do it super fast with AI. Another one that I really love that's really unexpected is take a screenshot of software that's not working the way you want, upload it and say, please look at this and tell me what's being used and explain how I can do whatever it is you need to do. So you're thinking about little things in your life that are a pain in the neck, which we'll get to a little more later. Stupid things that take up time. Like how many times have you blown 15, 20 minutes trying to figure out how to use software? Well, you can just go to ChatGPT and ask it, hey, I want to do this. How do I do it? I just did this with actually a Procore API, believe it or not, which was fun because it went and it grabbed it and it gave me a good answer. Another one that's kind of fun is, we're often, at least one person here is using a transcription on this. I think at least one. But if any more of you want to, by all means. After that, pop it in and say who has to do what. What are some deliverables that are in there? Increasingly, you can also say, hey, are there deliverables that nobody was assigned? You know what I mean? Or were there, or was any the other another fun one? Were there any factual statements made in this meeting that I might go check? So you can actually do things with those post meeting notes, which frankly most people don't read. You just keep them in case there's a problem later. But they're actually a lot more useful in this mode where you can pop it into ChatGPT or again any of these and ask it to extract things that are useful so you don't have to read 5 pages of notes. Um, so that's a good look at persona number two. The next one is intern. And of course, everything I just said is true here too. But now you've got tools like web search, right? So maybe it's creating a good draft. Like go off and find some things for me. Go find what my competitors are doing, or what are these websites doing, or so on and so forth. The interesting thing here, and this is where the use of the term chatbot is unexpectedly helpful, because you don't have to just get what it gives you. You can then say, great, do more of this. And I'll bet you a lot of you have done this, but I want to underscore the fact that you can go multiple turns. And what is interesting, and you may not know, is the way it does the multiple turns thing is it takes everything you've told it before, puts it back into the chatbot as a prompt, and then spits out a new response. The reason that matters is if you're finding that you're not getting where you want to go, you can actually go copy and paste the turns you care about and put it into a new chat. And again, it's like you've got multiple turns, but you're giving it a little bit of tuning. Again, it might not catch everything. It might require some editing or removal of things because, again, it's not perfect, but it's getting you started, which I think is really great. So I'm going to spend a little time on this one. I've been surprised pleasantly about how many things ChatGPT or an OpenAI through ChatGPT has chosen to build into the ChatGPT product. Because again, I, like a lot of people, was just using it on the answering mode. But then I went and took some courses. Later on, I'll tell you about them. On Coursera, there's a guy out of Vanderbilt who they're just really good and they're easy and you zip through them and you just learn things. But what's interesting about that is ChatGPT has, and again, I'll show these in just a minute, the ability to do a bunch of things as if it were its own software. And what it occurred to me is one of the great uses of AI right now is natural language operating of software. So I don't have to know what the buttons mean. I don't have to know what the commands mean. Some modern software has gotten super complicated. It's nice to do things super quick. And again, a lot of what they've built into ChatGPT are the sorts of things that aren't really in software anyway. So they're a super pain to figure out. Things like resizing an image and so on. So surprisingly useful. What's really cool is they can write code to execute. ChatGPT definitely can, and I don't know if Claude can, but they will. What that means is if you tell it to do something, it'll write a little bit of Python code that you don't even have to see. You can choose to look at it if you want. It'll execute that, do the thing, and then go on with its life. So it's effectively made a little bit of software just to do something, and then it does it and moves on. This is great because you're just telling software what you want. You're not going through all the learning curve of do I need to press that button and so on. And again, you can ask it how to do these things in case you don't know how to prompt it, which is kind of fun. So now you're stacking these capabilities where you can ask it how to do things, and then it can go write a little bit of software to execute something. And now you've got some fun capabilities. Again, the thing to expect is errors can still crop up. You're still going to want to pay attention to what it's doing. So examples of some of that is I talked about searching the web, which is fun. Low-level file management, which I'm going to get into a little more. The new product they have called Canvas, which is amazing, where you can ask it to do an outline and then drop into the outline and have ChatGPT work on one little line in the outline. If we have time, I'll show you that in a sec. Computer use is really new. So Claude came out with this, I want to say 6 months ago, maybe it was less than that. OpenAI just announced earlier this week, or maybe it was late last week, but very recently, this thing called Operator. It's in limited release right now, but basically it allows you to tell it to go do things, and it's going to go out on the internet and then book a table for you or some series of things that require someone to actually be pressing buttons and entering things. It's very new. They're still figuring out how to deal with authentication and payment and all that, but that's not the hardest thing in the world because PayPal solved that 20 years ago. So I think you're going to see that sort of thing really exciting or really evolve, over the coming months. Again, it's in this research review, as they call it. But the fact that you can tell it to do things and it can go use other software. Again, it's not going to do it without talking to you and asking your permission. But that's amazing because what it means is now you're getting to a place where it's doing things that you don't have to be there watching. And the final one is tasks and reminders in ChatGPT. I really encourage you to check that out because it's not just a reminder. It can actually do interesting things like look things up, create a new image for you every day. I have one that sends me stoic quotes every morning, which has absolutely no impact on my life, but I thought it might, and it's fun. But it can do actions. It isn't just sending you text. It can rerun the action every morning and do something new for you. So like checking the weather or whatever it is you might want, it'll go and do that thing and bring you back the answer. And I just do the morning because that seemed obvious, but there's no reason for that. So when I talk about low level file management, this is an example. So this is my dog and three other dogs. Of course, he's the best looking one in the middle. Just to show, I was like, hey, can you resize this and then recolor it to make it sepia and increase the brightness? So you can't really tell the brightness, but I didn't, in here, that little item right there, if you click on that, it'll show you what the code looks like. And in fact, just for giggles, let's do that. So I did this. This is later on, I'm going to show you a video. But basically, I said, hey, can you please take the uploaded video, sample one screenshot per second, and create a GIF for me to download? I don't know what any of this is. I know that it's Python because I know that it's Python. And actually, you could tell me it's not Hue, and I wouldn't know the difference. The point is, it went and wrote all this, executed all this, and then it gave me the GIF, which I could download. And of course, classic, the link didn't work. I told it, hey, it wasn't available, and now it's available, which is kind of amazing. So I asked it to do something that I would have no idea. I mean, I probably could go into something in Mac OS and figure it out, but all it took was one sentence, and it got it for me. And there's a ton of stuff like this, which I'm going to get to in just a sec. So this is a total eye chart. You can find this out by asking. But what's important here is the file types that it can handle is pretty amazing. It can take an image, obviously. It can unlock a zip. For those of you who know what JSON is, it's a format that you often use in computers. It can read JSON. It's amazing. It can take actually code files like Python and JavaScript and so on, Markdown, yada, yada. The point in all of this is, look, it's not going to turn you into a developer, but it means that some of those weird files that you get sometimes, you can pop in here and ask it what it is, right? Tell me what this thing is. Tell me what, extract this and so on. And I got this by asking a simple prompt. What can you handle and what can you do? There's a whole other one here I'm not going to get into. But, that's kind of fun that it can look at a CSV or an Excel or so on. The reason I tell you all this is how much of our life across a week or a month, and the frustration level too, is little things that I wish I could do and I got to go figure it out or ask someone or so on. Now you can pop it in here and it can do an amazing number of things. So for me, this is a new paradigm. This is a new way of thinking about software and of thinking about AI. We're so used to thinking of it as automated intelligence or as judging it on its accuracy. And what I'd like you to walk away thinking about, and this matters because it sets you up for thinking about the agents and the other things that are well, mostly agents that are coming this year, and you're going to just keep hearing more and more about. If we look at agents and AI generally as giving us final results, you're set up for the wrong expectation. If you're saying it's going to run around and do cognitive work and bring it back to me so I can apply judgment and I can do my job, that's the right paradigm. That's the right way of thinking about it. Because now you start saying, I'm not going to automate really hard stuff. I'm going to automate really dumb stuff, things that suck up a lot of time. And frankly, if you think about software, that's how we usually use it is, I don't want to have to go and pick out every item from this spec. Can the software do it for me? I don't want to have to add up every item in this column. Can the software do it for me? This is taking it to another level where it's going and getting things and lining them up or processing something and so that you can do other things with it. But I want you to think about cognitive work, not necessarily perfect answers or intelligence per se. Now, obviously, there's intelligence in here, but when you use the word intelligence, the level's too high and the category is wrong. Now I want you to think about cognitive work. And that's, if you think about it, when you get somebody, and that's another way of thinking of an intern, but you're asking them to do things that require a brain, but don't require a ton of experience or judgment. And that's a better way and a better category to put AI into. So again, think of it as doing stuff for us, not necessarily giving us answers. And again, that really opens up a ton of value because again, how often are we have really highly paid people doing stupid things? And it's not like you're going to hire someone junior to do a lot of those little things. Because, and I say stupid and I'm being tongue in cheek, but these are like low level little move this around or resize this or fix this or clean that up. A lot of that stuff you can get an AI to do. Simple stuff like upload your PowerPoint and say, hey, make everything the same font size. It'll do that for you. And then you download it again. Pretty wild, actually. So that to me, there was a lot in what I just said. So before I get into this one, I want to stop and ask if there are any questions or anything you guys want to talk about before I jump into the kind of the end here. Awesome. All right, I'm not going to make it that uncomfortable lingering. So the final one is this is getting into AI agents again next month, excuse me. We're going to go super deep and show you a bunch of stuff. But I wanted to get into this here because you're hearing about it a lot. Microsoft has had some not so great experience with their agents where they just keep putting things out a little before I think they're ready. Mind you, it's pretty sophisticated stuff. So I think it's just when you're as big as they are, and Apple just had the same thing with Apple Intelligence, where it like broke my Siri. A really good friend of mine's name is not that easy, and forget it. Um, so when you're as big as they are, even really good products will wind up not looking that great. So they're going to work through it. Salesforce has been making a ton of noise about their agent force. And apparently that's actually because I think the use cases are narrower. I think that it's turning out to be really good. Procore's been talking about AI for a year now, and I believe they've announced agents at least once. Frankly, everyone else and their cousin, of course, being a little tongue in cheek here, but also what you're seeing a lot of is custom agents from consultancies, and we do a little of this, where if you know you've got some things that keep getting, are required or things you'd like to automate, for not a lot of money, you can get them automated with some, pretty secure off the shelf things. The thing here is, automation of realistic files. I use the word realistic because for those of you who know what robotic process automation is, it's been around for a while. It was pretty brittle and it would break when you had the wrong file type or, there was formatting and so on, where what's great about agents is they can take real world files and do things with them. The reality of an agent is it's going to mean a lot of things. What it supposed to mean is you give it a goal and it figures out how to get that goal done. I think you're going to see automations under the category of agent and just be tolerant to people using being a little loosey goosey with the words they use. Again, from automation to truly agentic, but also ranging from workflow specific, which I'm at the current state of technology, I really like things that are tied to a workflow and tuned to a workflow because of all the variability we talked about before, and sometimes things aren't as accurate as you want. The more narrow you can make the use case, the more likely you're going to get very good outputs. Doesn't mean that there aren't general agents that are doing some good things, but I think that's some of where Microsoft is maybe struggling. And again, I have every confidence it's going to be utterly amazing, but in the last 6 months, I think there's been a little bit of noise about that. Um, I think also agents are going to be better as tool users than directly operating on documents. What I mean by that is I think you're going to find the best outcomes when an agent is using other software rather than being the agent itself that's going to do like look at a big file and pull things out of it. And the cool thing about that is the cool thing about that is that you're able to get the benefits of really tried and tested software and the benefits of how easy agents are going to be to talk to and use. Think about it. If you have something you need and you go to an agent and say, ask me all the questions that you need to get this thing done. And the thing might be, I don't know, check all my RFIs again, for how many have been responded. I don't know, I'm making it up on the fly here, but you know what I mean? Like make me a graph of how quickly RFIs get responded to. Not that that's a sensitive topic or not. Well, it may not know what to do there. So it might ask you like, okay, where do I go find the RFIs? Is there a time frame? Is there what tools do I use? Do I need logins? All that stuff. But the point is you're having this conversation and you can do it with voice, which is even cooler, as if you were talking to someone. So you get the benefits of the flexibility and ease of use of AI without having to worry about the quality of the output because it's going into Procore, or it's going into some other product, and benefiting from their years and in some cases decades of hard work making a reliable output but you don't have to go learn all of how they do what they do. Um, a question came through, and by the way, folks, if you ask a question, feel free to ask it to the whole group. Real quick, there's a question about what happens to data that are uploaded in ChatGPT. Excellent question. There's a bigger point to be made here, and that is um, any AI will have a privacy policy. And the cool thing about that is you can copy the privacy policy, stick it into an AI, even another AI if you want. Whether it's pop ChatGPT's privacy policy into Claude if you're nervous, and have them tell you to answer that question. Right now, if you're paying for it, there's a couple of ways that it won't use your data and it won't show up somewhere. One of them is that you can opt out of that. The second is you can actually if you have a specific what do you call it, a specific chat or session and you don't want it to go anywhere, you can opt out. There's a thing called temporary chats. So to answer the question that was asked, it's a really good one, and it keeps coming up, is they all have a privacy policy that will tell you the answer. In the case of ChatGPT, it depends a little on how you're dealing with them, but right now they'll tell you, unless it's the free version, it never goes into their training set. And I think even then you can opt out of it. If you're working with a company that is using OpenAI's API, so you don't even see OpenAI, it's going into someone else's product, it never goes into their training. And you can have delete of data and so on and so forth. So there's a lot you can do to protect your information. I will say that if you've got project data that you are contractually obliged to be careful about, there's two reasons. One of them is I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I don't, and then again, I would rely on their privacy policy to answer that question. But the second thing is I'd be careful about using an untuned product like ChatGPT. It's just a little bit general. So look, if you want to get a first blush or first look at something, it's great. But be really careful about how rigorous it's going to be depending on what your question is. So I'd be more worried about the quality of the rigor and completeness of the output than I would about your data showing up, like we saw those horror stories where Getty Images logo was showing up in some responses. So I think that that's less of a concern, the privacy side. I'd be more worried about, as I say, using a general tool for a high, kind of a high risk output. But again, if you just want to get a sense or a summary to get yourself started and get your arms around it, it's good for that. Just be aware of its limits. So hopefully that helps. Good question. So what does all this mean? This is me kind of bringing this in for a landing here. So stop thinking of AI as one category. So start thinking of it. It's a general purpose technology. So what matters is what product is it in? And again, we think of ChatGPT as an AI itself, and it's not. It's actually a software product that has an AI model behind it. And one of the cool things is you can choose which of those models you're using. That kind of illustrates my point. Same thing with Claude, by the way, from Anthropic. You can choose which of them. They're not quite as quick on the toggling back and forth, but nevertheless, there's a model behind the product you're using. I'd like you also, this is just a good thing for the industry. What kind of when we think of cognitive work, what do we mean? And what could it mean? What kind of cognitive work could you pass off now? I like to ask people, and they literally do ask it in these words. What's the dumbest thing you spend time on of course, in your job? I don't need to know about your personal habits. And this will wind up being some interesting things. Like we spend a lot of time chasing RFIs, or we chase a lot of time just categorizing things. One example that came up is, when we get punch lists from QA, it's based on the order that they got them in. Well, I want to reorganize that. And that takes a lot of time because it could be 100, 200, it depends on the project. But that's stupid. And you could pop that into AI and have it, well, you may need to do a little bit of work, but that's the kind of thing that's the kind of stupid thing that AI should automate for you. So you don't have to spend an hour of anyone's time doing that. And there's going to be a lot of little things like that, I think. Thinking about low risk cognitive work, right? So things like first drafts, write me an agenda. No one else is going to see this. This is just getting you started. Write me a PowerPoint outline. And here again is where Canvas is great, because you can go into the outline and continue to have AI help you to develop. But keep in mind, it's not just an answer, it's ready to do work. So you don't just have to take what it gave you. It can say, like I said before, ask me all the questions you need to do to draft this RFI, or summarize this meeting, create a list of all the factual statements made in the summary. So you can have it doing things that are more work than you expect, more work than we're used to. In this case, a lot of times it isn't that we're thinking about the old technology, we're thinking about how we would talk to a person, what we'd ask a human to do. Here again, we get to think of it as a new category where, yeah, a human could do that, but we never asked them to. But now you get to removing friction. So how do I calculate like things that you might want to know? And rather than not doing the thing in front of you and stressing out about the fact you don't know how to do something, go ask it. I don't expect anyone to be thinking about IRR. An internal rate of return is one of the ways you value whether a project or an investment makes sense. But can Procore API provide RFI information? I didn't know that, and I asked, and yes, it did. And I said, show me how. So it didn't just answer the question, it actually dug in and showed me, which is amazing. Now, in this case, Procore has a wonderful API that you can just go, and their documentation is really great. So it just went and read that documentation and summarized it for me. Well, okay, Procore is unusually good, but there's a lot of companies that where they've got great, what do you call it, documentation, or maybe they're just telling you what the product can do. So one of the things you might imagine is, hey, I'm looking for, I don't know, project management software. Go find me five and tell me and create a chart of what their features are against each other. It's not going to be perfect, but it's better than you going and doing it. But another one that's fun is look at the screenshot and tell me why my Wi-Fi isn't working. It might ask for more than one. It might, but like simple things that are driving you nuts. You're asking if how are you working with ChatGPT if the Wi-Fi isn't working? I'm assuming you're doing it through your phone. But the point is, like, it can help you troubleshoot things that otherwise, stop you in your tracks or slow you down. Little day-to-day time-sucking activities. So cropping and resizing and recoloring. This is the video I was telling you about before, where I said, hey, crop it and turn it into a GIF for me, right? So it went and took every 10 seconds, there's a GIF. So now it's a lot of the same things, but you can see it's different. And that's kind of a dumb example, but you could imagine if you've got a really big video file and you want to downsize it or you want to make it into something for a presentation. Upload expenses and pull them all into a table. So if you've got expenses, a great one for this is Uber, where you can download a PDF and it's a pain in the neck. Upload all of those in and make them into a table for me, right? It's just an endless list of silly little things we blow time on. And how many of you have put off getting your expenses done because it's a pain in the neck to get all the receipts in one place? Well, now, especially if they're digital, which now like 90% of them are, you're able to do that. And you take a picture of whatever physical receipts you have and upload that too. And now it's just taken away from you. One little pain in the neck that's a time suck. Summarizing a table, summarizing some of those amazing file types I showed you before. So the point in all of this is rethinking how we look at AI from an evolution of Google, where we're just getting answers, to now it can run out there and do cognitive work, especially the low-level stuff that you may never, you'd be embarrassed to ask a human to do. But golly, it'd be great if I could, right? If you had the most patient assistant in the world, well, now you do, as long as you're aware of its limits. So, and the final one, getting AI to help with AI. How do I write a prompt? Ask me until you know enough. What in your answer is based on fact? What's the best way to do something? So kind of bringing it in for a landing, the point is get past AI as one category. AI products, they're a toolkit. So think of them that way. Think of the strengths and weaknesses of the tool you're using. Understand what to expect and ask. If you don't know what to expect, ask. What are the weaknesses? What should I use it for? What should I avoid? The providers of these things, obviously they want to sell it to you, so they're going to be biased towards positive answers. But if you say, what can I count on? What should I be careful of? And so on, you'll at least get a start. And of course, other people using the tool will often have slightly more candid examples. And then finally, get into it yourself. So I've obviously talked a lot about ChatGPT Plus. This is a screenshot of the tools this morning. So you've got the ability to upload something. You can have it switch to a smarter model. This is worldwide search. This is the drop down from there. So you can create a picture you're pretty used to. Search, think. Canvas is really cool. I'm not going to get into it today. And then there's advanced voice. If you haven't used advanced voice yet, it's pretty wild because you can literally talk to it in a way that is way beyond what Siri could do. Check out Claude Tool Use if you want. I've mentioned this guy, Jules White. So it's on Coursera. It's $45 for a month or something. It's really cheap. I'm here to help. I do these things for free because I think we're in the beginning of a real change in the industry. And I think people start at really high level pictures. And I think that distracts us from the fact that there's a ton of time saving, risk reduction, anxiety reduction that can be done right now with the tools that are right in front of you. And those tools are going to get much more sophisticated this year. One of the things we'll talk about with agents next month is how you can do some of what I talked about in terms of using AI to operate other things. So hopefully this has kind of gotten you thinking differently about AI as a set of categories and how you can get into subcategories. Um, the final thing I'll get into is this earlier this week. I mean, it's been around a little while, but it made a ton of noise this week, and you're still hearing an awful lot of snark on LinkedIn about DeepSeek. So this is for those of you who don't know, DeepSeek is a model that came out. I think it's been around almost a month, certainly over a week. That does a lot of what the best models do, and they were saying that they trained it for $5 million instead of training it for, a billion or 100 million or whatever. And the fear there was that the Chinese are able to be so much more efficient and they're using chips that are supposedly worse. Oh my gosh, are we blowing money and are we raising too much? And is this all a waste? And is NVIDIA going to yada yada? So you heard the word, this is a Sputnik moment. And I think after a little bit of time, cooler heads are prevailing. And what this is turning out to be is two big things. One is the Chinese have announced themselves as competitors in a way that they hadn't been before, which is ultimately good for everybody. The practical reality is their products are going to not be as acceptable in the U.S. because of all of I mean, if you're worried about sending data to OpenAI, people are going to be a little concerned about a company that has ties to the Chinese Communist Party. So I think that it's more like a competition at the top end. But more importantly, what they did do is teach everybody how to do things another way. Well, that's the story that's going on every month, where Anthropic announces something, or Google announces something, or Mistral in France announces something, or OpenAI announces. So this is a constant drumbeat of everybody pushing each other to go further, better, faster. What is kind of cool, so I think it's not as scary, and I think you're going to find that the money that it takes to do this well. I think that the story is a lot more complicated. They didn't get done it for 5 million. What they said they got done for 5 million. I think you're going to hear more and more if you care. If you don't, move on with your life. What is kind of cool, though, is it does move attention a little bit away from models towards use cases like what I talked about earlier. And I think it's going to accelerate the degree to which companies start creating more tools, agents, and applications because they realize there really is no moat. There's no defensibility around how good your models are. So the OpenAIs of the world are not going to make their money back because their model is the best. Their models are going to be why you buy their product. And their product is what they're going to build out. And look, the practical reality is ChatGPT just proved that point because they've been building all these tools all along, and just now are you starting to realize quite how many of them there are. So I don't think that the sky is falling. I don't think that DeepSeek means that all the money and effort spent in the US has been in vain. They couldn't have done anything without all that money having already been spent. But I do think we now have a more aggressive set of competitors than we thought we did. That tends to be a benefit, even if it's a little freaky in the short run. And I'm sure there's been some stock portfolios that did benefit from a pretty rough week. Personally, I think it's a buying opportunity, but don't take my word for it. And that's it. So for those of you who haven't signed up yet, we're gonna go deep into agents. We're gonna show some real examples and get under how these things could be created and so on, but also really, just like we did today, kind of talk it kind of what I hope is a useful level as opposed to too hype driven. So that's it. Thank you all for coming. We've got time.